out of 5 shells. Perfect episode. Nothing more to say. Well, okay, I may have a few words. Though a lot of the larger arc analysis I'm going to save for my season/series in review video to follow this one. I made allusions at the beginning of the show that this could all just be its own universe, and hey, I and several people all called it. So Dean's back, Bobby too, and of course they brought along Baby as well. It was nice to see everybody, I must admit, though I'm torn on whether it was best to bring Bobby, who's always welcome, or should they have gotten Jeffrey Dean Morgan to return. It would have been very interesting to see John react to a person that he might have been. I must admit, Jensen did a solid job selling his brief moments at the end, and it's a credit to Drake that he was able to hold his own in that scene as well. I could believe that this was a guy meeting his younger alternate universe dad, and that's not an easy sell. Really, everybody did solid jobs this episode. Nida was probably the weakest of the main cast as she struggled a bit in her possession scene to really convey that I'm a second different character that the role requires. Out of the guest stars, I thought Kelly Sullivan was weaker playing the Queen, especially compared to Bridget Regan playing the fake Queen earlier in the season. Though I know I'm a bit biased, but I really think Kelly needed to chew the scenery more. It did hurt that she was given a ton of exposition to deliver all at once in long stretches. That is both exhausting as well as not giving you much room to really stretch the character as an actor. So I am grading her on a bit of a curve and not holding it too much against her. But speaking of, let's talk about the revelation. Purely from a plot examination, the Akrita are an example of trying to have your cake and eat it too, of wanting something otherworldly and having an ancient menace who is tied to the hero's past. Without more time to really flesh everything out, they really needed to pick one origin of the Akrita instead of trying to stitch together 3 different ones. For one thing, if the Akrita were once just directionless monsters who the Queen gave purpose to, why then would defeating the Queen stop them? That seems like it would just let the Akrita off their leash and they would just rampage across the multiverse unimpeded. For another, if this was something left over by Chuck, why isn't Jack taking care of it? I know he has a policy of non-interference apparently, but isn't letting those creatures run loose kind of allowing celestial interference in creation? It seems entirely within Jack's rules that he could destroy or cut off or whatever the Akrita. This is what I mean about the origins not being thought through. Really, it seems like the Akrita should have been an invention by that universe. Then you have had the classic trope of the god hamstrung by his own rules. Jack can't interfere, so then he gets Dean to do so in a way that bends his rule without breaking it. It remains a classic trope going all the way back to even old mythologies for a reason. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about villain motivations. If there is one thing I wish I could stress to each and every writer, it's that a villain's motivations should make perfect sense to the villain. This doesn't mean the villain has to be right. It just means the steps and actions the villain takes to get to their goal should make perfect sense to them. Sure, there might be a more logical or better solutions available that others can see, but being convinced that you have the only viable answer and ignoring the advice of others is, well, an obvious trait of what makes a villain. I've seen so many storytellers do whatever they want in a story with the justification that the villain is mad or insane, and it drives my own self mad every time because it's just lazy writing. So here we find out the Queen, hang on, what was her name again? Joan Hopkins. So it's not that I mind Joan's goal or dream. I can admit that it does make a certain twisted bit of logic that to stop monsters, you'll just wipe out humanity. I just can't follow what her thought process is with other hunters. Her motivation makes sense if she's grown so obsessed with the hunting things part of her job, she's seeking out a final solution to it all. Yeah, I can follow that. But to then declare that this is for hunters and they should join her? How? I mean, we have seen on the mothership several times and it was hinted at a few times in this series that monsters will just hunt hunters as much as any other human if they feel the need. And if you wipe out all of humanity, save for hunters, how are the survivors going to live? Was a lot of farming knowledge picked up in between the lore research? Again, this isn't about, well, they're the villain and not thinking things through. This has reached the point I can't figure out Joan's reasoning at all, even to her own mind. This is where I think they should have established an origin, that the Increta were in fact transformed humans. That the show should have revealed Joan's big plan was to transform all people into worse monsters that can fight back against regular monsters and save hunters all the trouble. This would also explain why she was obsessed with collecting monster essences. And then you have her offers of join me, you would understand as that means transforming and becoming an Increta yourself. Maybe had the show been given the back nine, they would have had time to flesh out all of the motivation, but, well, they didn't. And I am always of the opinion, don't talk about or promise to people what could have been. Work with what you've got. If you're not going to get the time, then edit, trim down the plans you had for the villain and streamline it to fix. This episode was a ton of exposition to try and get everything to fit in. Normally, I kind of enjoy exposition in these stories, but this episode was starting to tax even my patience. You could divide up the 3 acts by which of the 3 exposition dumps they're delivering. In fact, while I'm on about annoyances, I am kind of pissed about the crystal Rowena gave Ada. Everything they went through in the last episode and all the tension in this episode about giving up a part of her soul and the entire thing was just to free Lotta. You do not go through that kind of drama for that weak of a payoff. After all that drama, they should have at least slammed the thing into Baby's dashboard and supercharged the car before it slammed into the Queen. There were plenty of other ways to save Lotta, which we have seen this season. Also, a side note which has bothered me both in the last few seasons of Supernatural and now in Winchesters, why does nobody ever fake joining one of the sides? More than once we'll have this whole join me offer by an antagonist, but there's never any details on what exactly that entails. Why does nobody ever go undercover, or even just go along with the villain until it reaches the point of crossing a line the character can't, and then they go back on the deal? All the betrayals that our characters have had in their lives, and they never once think about trying to join the villain just to get close enough to stick a knife in their back? Well, okay, there was Lucifer in Season 5 and Michael in Season 14, but why never anybody else? Yeah, there are tons of questions and details I could keep quibbling over for hours. Like, what is Dean now? Isn't he technically a ghost? Do you get a body if your spirit crosses universe? What exactly is Baby there? But some of these questions, I'm fine with them remaining mysterious and leaving it up to the audience to debate and discuss. The show gave us enough clues that we could tease out an answer, but it's not like a necessary answer for the plot to fully work. Or should I say it's right on that line of explanation and mystery. Though I'm still wondering how Dean grew both his beard and hair in the afterlife, and then found a barber to trim them. Besides, with Jack involved, we can always say that maybe he was allowing rules and things to be bent in order for the day to be saved. But as some viewers don't like it, I can understand. I freely admit I'm a bit biased here. If you read my Supernatural finale fanfic, well, it involved Dean and Sam in a multiverse adventure with Jack that culminated in both of them driving the Impala into the heart of danger with kick-ass music blaring on the tape deck. In no way am I accusing Robbie Thompson or any other Winchester writer of ripping me off. I'm just saying that for a couple of minutes there, I got to see on screen my fanfic. Or at least the closest it will ever get to being realized. So, yeah, the ending bought a lot of goodwill for me personally. Besides, I'm always a sucker for Baby getting to save the day. So, although flawed, there was enough good stuff in this episode that it barely earns out a 5 out of 5 shells. As I so frequently said this season, this was a payoff episode let down by the setups that preceded it. Still, they gave it their all at the end and swung for the fences in the final inning. And that kind of effort I can respect. The rest we'll talk about as we look back over the season and and look over the storytelling as a whole.